Hello everyone, and welcome back to another week of the Backlog Bunker. This week, we're going to be talking about the Game Awards, but not the Game Awards that you're probably thinking of, because those are fucking boring, except for Mega Man. That was pretty cool. No, I mean my Game Awards, because I want to give shoutouts to the games that I played this year. That's about it. I'm going to be using the same categories you can find on Backloggd for its Game of the Year award things, with the addition of my own category, which is Best Shoutout, which is basically what I want to use for games that I didn't necessarily enjoy, that don't really fit into one of the other categories, but I still want to mention for one reason or another. I'm going to go through the nominees because if you just went purely off of my backlog, you'd see a lot of games I was replaying, which I obviously wouldn't want to count for Game of the Year this year, on top of the fact that there are some things that I didn't talk about on the bunker, so if you're not using Backloggd and you only watch my bunkers, then you wouldn't even know about some games that I played. And so, the nominees are Shoutout, Marvel Rivals, Marvel Midnight Suns, Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Castlevania Rondo of Blood, Mega Man's 1 through 7, Balatro, Hades, Pokemon White, Pokemon Y, Dispatch, and Marvel Tokone. And for Best Multiplayer, unsurprisingly, because it's the only multiplayer game I really played that's on that list, Marvel Tokone, because, like I said on the bunker, it feels a lot like Dragon Ball FighterZ, which is my favorite fighting game of all time. It doesn't really get much better than that. Of course, Marvel Tokone isn't out yet, so arguably it shouldn't be on here, but if I didn't use Marvel Tokone, I wouldn't have had anything for Best Multiplayer, so you take them where you get them. For Best Soundtrack, it's Final Fantasy VII. Now, technically, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm also counting things like Advent Children or the remake soundtrack in the Final Fantasy VII collection. However, even though things like the battle theme or One Winged Angel have better versions in other things like Advent Children or the remake games, those original songs still came from Final Fantasy VII, and if those other versions didn't exist, I would still love the songs from Final Fantasy VII. Is Bombing Mission a phenomenal song in remake? Of course. Is it better than the original? Absolutely. But if the remake version didn't exist, FF7 would still come with Bombing Mission, which is a fantastic song. Hell, if we're talking about songs like Genova, I really only like the original version of it. Not to say the remake version is bad or anything, just that only really half of the song is Genova. The other half is just orchestra slop. Best art direction goes to Hades, for two reasons mostly. For one, just because of the art style. I like the style all the characters are drawn in. It's very, very appealing. I wish the game itself looked a little bit more like that, but obviously it's a little unrealistic. I just wish a lot of games were more like a Kingdom Hearts 3 situation, where the way they look in the game's high budget moments is how the game looks all the time. But beyond just the art style, I like the decisions made with the art. I love how a lot of the characters are drawn, and as I mentioned in my review of Hades, I really like Greek mythology, so seeing a lot of these different renditions of the characters is interesting to me, and I like the way that they're drawn and the decisions made in terms of interpreting them. Best narrative goes, unsurprisingly, to Shoutout. I talked about this a lot in my review of Shoutout, but the story is really, really good to the point where it made me reconsider how I feel about visual novels. But kind of in the opposite way that Danganronpa did. Danganronpa made me rethink visual novels in that I had a higher standard of gameplay for visual novels, but Shoutout made it so that I had a higher standard of story for them, where if a story is good enough for a visual novel, I don't even fucking care that it's not a game. I'll just read it like it's a novel. Is this a somewhat ironic stance to hold during my Game of the Year thing? Yeah, probably. But at the end of the day, Shoutout is technically a game, but a game with a story that I really, really, really liked, and didn't expect to really like that much. But so be it. Best gameplay goes to Marvel Midnight Suns, and this was a little bit hard for me because technically half of Marvel Midnight Suns has gameplay that I kinda hate, but the other half is so good that I think that if I was just talking about which game has the singular best instance of gameplay, it would have to go to Midnight Suns. Of any or most of the games I played this year, Marvel Midnight Suns is probably one of the only ones that I would go back to just to play. Not to replay, not to complete, but just to go in and just do some bullshit, because I really, really like the strategy gameplay in it that much. Before we get to Game of the Year, I want to talk about Best Shoutout, which goes to Final Fantasy VII. And the reason for this is for two things, really. Number one was the story. As far as Final Fantasy games went up until 7, the stories for them were like, okay. 1 doesn't really have a story, 2 has a story but it sucks, 3 doesn't really have a story, 4 has a story but it sucks, 5 has a story but it's, good, 6 has a story but I didn't really care for it all that much, but then 7 fucking got me. It's unfortunate that Final Fantasy VII is the most popular Final Fantasy, because a lot of that game's twists would have hit me way harder if I hadn't already absorbed them in some form or fashion through cultural osmosis. Then the other reason for best shoutout is something else that I mentioned on the bunker and in my review, which is the materia system, and how much I really like it. To give you the super short version, I've never really liked in RPGs just how much they have you fucking with equipment, when for the most part, equipment really just boils down to making your stats go up. Final Fantasy VII boldly asks, hey, what if your equipment actually mattered for your long-term progression in the game? And you're rewarded for thinking ahead with long-term gains like money and powerful spells, something that every RPG should do, but really they don't. And that doesn't even get into all the awesome ways you can combine materia for really unique effects. So while I might not have enjoyed playing Final Fantasy VII, I'm glad that I got things out of it to enjoy, so it gets the best shoutout. Last but not least is Game of the Year, and unfortunately for me, I'm a very logical person, meaning that my Game of the Year is a thing that I think is the best game that I played that year, even if it doesn't make me the happiest. Which is why Game of the Year goes to Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. While Yakuza 8 did not do individually best at any one category, like in music or gameplay, and certainly not narrative, it did do well enough at all of them for it to be the best complete experience of all the games that I played this year. On top of the fact that it is being buffed just a little bit by the fact that it's an RPG, my favorite genre of all time. Again, individually, Infinite Wealth did not stand out at all, but if we're talking a complete experience, it does go over both Midnight Suns and Kadowa Shoujo, which would be my runner-ups. In Midnight Sun's best moments, it was like sex. That gameplay was just so good, but its best moments are not necessarily few and far between, but certainly not very often, and when it's not present, you can really feel it. And Kadowa Shoujo, where its best moments of the story were like sex, sometimes literally, all it really has going for it is the story. Like I said, it's not really a game. Did I enjoy it more than Yakuza 8? Yeah, probably. But if I'm talking about my game of the year, the game that made my year, Kadowa Shoujo doesn't really come up in that conversation. And that's my Game of the Year ceremony, with big quotes around ceremony. I really wanted to do a lot more in terms of the bunker this season, but unfortunately I was way more crunched for time this year than I was last, so probably not going to have any bunker content for quite a while, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. Happy holidays, and that's it. Get out of here.